Oh, welcome everybody. We got a full crew here today. We've got myself, Dan Earlywine, Mike Brower with Dan Earlywine in his shop. We got, of course, Ian, Michael Bashkin, Bo Hannum, James Rodman, Ben Kaler, and anybody else who wants to join us. So I can fit as many people on the screen as I want. So we can have this party to be ever expanding from here. So I decided we were going to have a little bit of fun today, just doing kind of like a classroom show and tell. The Dan and Doug show episodes are going to start getting increasingly more complicated because we're going to be moving on to more involved repairs. Up until now, we've been doing a lot of bread and butter stuff, nuts, saddles, setups, fretwork, and that kind of thing. And in future episodes and months, we're going to be going into like some more kind of meaty subjects. But before we start doing that, I wanted to spend a little time just doing a little bit of fun kind of show and tell stuff. And a subject near and dear to my heart is jigs. I'm somebody who when I find a use for making a jig for a repeatable repair, I do. I'll jump in the deep end of the pool and go ahead and make something as long as I'm going to use it again. I know Dan is the same way, except Dan is likely to make a jig just to use it for what he needs to get done, and then take it apart and use all the parts for other jigs in the future. But we'll talk more about that. But I decided to invite a whole host of lutes that I admire to join us and show Dan and I what they've got up their sleeves, because I could use some new ideas. So that's why we're all here today. So hey Dan.
Hey, what?
So what I figure we'll do is we'll just take turns and go around today and start showing off some stuff. So how do I just remove all spotlights at once? How do I do that? Do you know, Ian?
You have to click on the, let's see here. Hold on a second, I'm trying to line up my Instagram thing. You have to click on, there should be 3 dots on the right-hand side of the thing. Do you want me to help you do it? Maybe I can do it now.
I can just remove them individually. I was hoping to be able to remove them all at once. I thought there was a way to do that. I should have practiced this.
You know, maybe if you share a screen and then unshare a screen, it'll reset it. Maybe not.
Ian, that's not going to work.
Okay. Who said that?
Cody.
That didn't work.
You have to do it one by one, I think.
Okay, that's fine. I can do that. So what we're going to do real quick is I'm gonna get my stuff out of the way first, just because I don't have altogether that many jigs to show off. I've got a few that are kind of unique to us, or from what I can gather. Then I want to start seeing everybody else's stuff, because I'm more excited about that, to tell you the honest truth. So this is what we're going to start with here. And as with everything, anybody who wants to chime in with a question, feel free to just chime in. You don't have to ask permission. Just unmute yourself and ask away, or put it in the chat. Ian will monitor the chat for us. So here's a few jigs that I like, that I use. This, of course, is probably the most adventurous one that I've made to date. This was inspired by Frank Ford's, what he used to call bench clamps, for guitars that had sides coming away from the top where you had to push the sides back in so you can reglue them. I've done it every way known to mankind for decades and hated every bit of it because it was always cumbersome. It was always bar clamps stretching across the sides of the guitar, or having to remove the neck of a guitar to put it in a mold. And I finally had a job come in about 3 years ago that was paying me enough to sit down and really kind of think through a jig to be able to do it in virtually one application. And so this is what I came up with after thinking about it enough for long enough and sitting there sourcing parts and figuring out what I wanted it to do. That's what we eventually came up with. I think it was Eric Collier who won the naming rights to this on an Instagram post, and he wanted to call it the Eric Clapton jig. This is a guitar that was most recently used in the jig. This is an old Epiphone archtop. I think it's a Zenith or something like that, or a Zephyr. This is Zephyr. And it was in for a binding replacement. And as soon as the binding came away from the guitar, I could see every section of binding that was coming away from the guitar. The back and the sides were letting go. The sides were buckling out. And it was another perfect perfect case to use this in. And I was really surprised that once I did make this, how much use I wound up getting out of it. It's just a board. It has feet to hold up the guitar. This is removable. This I put in, I cobbled together. Most of the jigs I make, I just cobble together from other parts. This is a part from a Total Vice jig or Total Vice that wound up never coming to fruition. It was a prototype that Jeff and I were messing around with, and these were leftover parts. A lot of the stuff were leftover parts, that wind up in other jigs. But that's what that is. This is just a support that can be raised and lowered on a threaded insert. And the guitar I can put in there any way I want to, face up, face down. I can manipulate the feet to be able to raise and lower the feet as needed to be so the guitar sits squarely on the 4 feet. And in this case, I can move it all the way forward. The reason that's there is to hold the guitar in the cutaway. That's tightenable from the bottom. I have 2 hold downs that I just tighten on either side to secure the guitar down onto the feet. I can move those wherever I want. I wanted a workstation, or I wanted some kind of jig that would allow me to put, I should move it up a little bit. To put the components wherever I wanted. So I started with a board, and every time I need to put another component in a different spot, all I got to do is drill another hole. If it's a different shaped guitar, if it's a different size guitar, I wanted something I could use for almost anything from a single oboe all the way up to an 18-inch archtop. So that's how the guitar sits in there. I could put it in face down, face up. If I wanted to put it face down, this could move to the other side. There's a hole underneath there. All of these parts come out of the board and can be relocated anywhere I want it. Of course, everything I have in my shop comes loadable into a Total Vice docking head. Almost every jig I make has a 1 3/4 post or tube coming out of the bottom of it. You've all heard me say that if we wait around long enough, I'll eventually have a 1 3/4 post coming out of me too. So that's what the workstation looks like when the guitar is loaded in. And what it allows me to do is glue up my sides after I use some polycarbonate. I can move these individual fingers in. So they're situated against the guitar. The opposite side of the guitar can have pressure pushing against it wherever I might be or wherever I might need it. Right now, this is holding the guitar from moving forward. Here, as I push in the sides, I can exert pressure with individual fingers and these swivel feet. You know, at any point of the guitar, at any point around the entire circumference of the guitar. And as I move these, they exert continuous pressure in the sides. This has already been glued. I've already done this guitar in this. And after everything's set up and lined up, I can work glue into those seams with a spatula or a syringe. And then all I have to do is drop my trigger clamps in between the feet. And I can get in between each one of them and work my way all the way around with trigger clamps that way in between each finger, no matter where I am, and virtually do the entire back or the entire section that I want. And if then once I've got this section glued, I can go to another section. We were unglued from here all the way to here. We had some sections up here, and you can see the holes here where I've drilled for different guitars. The components are actually all easily sourceable from McMaster Carr. I make blocks that, wonder if I can get in close here. Let me just come close to the camera. I make blocks of different sizes that I just drill the right size hole through. And all I do is I just take an angle bracket that would normally be on an extruded aluminum bar. I have an insert, threaded insert that I just drove right into that. And then I slip that through the block and secure it wherever I need to on the table. And bolt it in. Once I've secured it, that's virtually not going anywhere. It'll withstand whatever pressure I put up against it. I just take a threaded rod, slip it through here, whatever size I need. These I sourced from McMaster Carr as well. I think Danny West found a cheaper place for these. These are swivel feet that thread right onto my 1/4 rod. I can turn that anywhere I need it to push anywhere I would need it in whatever direction. And then I just put on a handle to make it easier to turn. These are the cheapest handles I could find. and I can apply pressure to whatever point of the guitar anywhere I would need it to be able to line up the sides to the back or the front if it were face up, and then be able to clamp it shut. So I can exert pressure from either direction. I can exert counter pressure. So this way I'm not using the guitar as my clamping. I've ever done this with a bar clamp and I'm trying to push this in from this side, if I used a bar clamp, it was always troubling to me that I was using the guitar as the counter force to squeeze the guitar together. And I always hated that. All I wanted to do was push this side without pulling the other side if that seam wasn't open. So that's the Clampton jig. That's probably the most adventurous one that I've made to date. Does anybody have any questions about this one? This one's
So
been
those are just 2x2s that you cut and drilled holes through for the
just
bases.
Yep, just poplar 2x2s. You know, I know of I think 4 or 5 of these jigs to now exist. I know Danny West has made one, I think, and Joe Golden has made one. A couple of 3 others that I've seen out there.
And the angled pieces, is that just some like 2x2 whatever angled stock that you cut up into those 2-inch pieces?
Yeah, this is like
that.
I think they're 1.5. This is 1.5 by 1.5 blocks. These are 1.5 that I didn't cut. They just come individually exactly as we see them.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Those are like a bracket of some sort?
Yeah, it's a bracket that would normally be used with extruded aluminum. I use press-in inserts.
Yeah, those are cool.
20, you know. All of this stuff, and if anybody's ever interested in making one of these, just email me, and I will send you the McMaster car parts list if you're crazy enough to do one of these. I will say it's probably one of the most expensive jigs I've ever made. And I didn't decide to come up with this one until I had a job that was paying me well enough for the expenditure. So, but once it was made, I can't tell you how useful this thing has become.
What do you think ballpark on that? Like 7 grand, like that?
For the jig itself? No.
Yeah.
No, I think I can't remember exactly how much. I remember Joe Golden put together one that had as many parts to this, and I don't remember exactly how much it cost, but it was less than it was definitely less than $1,000. It was probably like $500 or 300, maybe $300 in parts altogether.
So right in the neighborhood of a neck jig.
Yeah, it was probably about. I mean, the most expensive part of this whole thing, and that's why I can't remember where Danny West said he got his, but this is the most expensive part. These suckers are like $7 a piece or $9.
Oh,
They're like they were $9 from McMaster and $6 from where I found them.
Yeah, so he found them for like $6. It's one place. I bought mine from McMaster before they went up in price. When I bought them, they were only about $6 or $5.99 or something like that. Then they had a huge jump in price. But you know, you can count. I probably have about when I have all of the holes filled, I probably have about 30 of them, you know, right there. So that, you know, when I bought these, back when I bought them, you're probably talking about $180 just in the swivel feet. Then, you know, but the difference there then is the brackets, the threaded rod, which I cut myself from like 4-foot lengths, and the handles don't really come to, you know, $100. You know, then of course just the wood. So it's not, I mean, it's probably all told, probably a $300, maybe a $400 jig to make. Dan Early Wine asked me about it when I first put it together, and he says, "Yeah, but he says, how much time did you spend designing it?" And I said, "Probably about 20 hours." And he says, "How much you charge an hour?" So,
Yeah.
if you factor that in, it's about a $2,500 jig.
But dialing that side in and getting it just ready for binding at the end of that is priceless.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how much of a pleasure it is getting the side perfectly aligned and then just being able to work with a spatula, some glue, and you can come along with as many trigger clamps as you need. And, if you go on Instagram, you'll see, if you go back a year or two, you'll see the first one I made this for was a D'Angelico that we were having that kind of a problem with. And you can see trigger clamps going around the entire thing, front and back. And it made what would have been a near impossible job take about 30 minutes. And so right there, it paid for itself. Plus, like I said, that job was paying me enough that it more than covered the cost of making the jig. So when I have a jig in the back of my mind to use that is going to be troublesome or expensive to make, I'll always wait for the job that comes along to pay me for it. And that usually helps take this thing out of it. So that's this one. Let me put this aside.
Just curious if there's like a Z-axis adjustability, like where the feet are.
What do you mean?
Sometimes it might not be necessary, I would imagine, but just like perpendicularity to the top, like if the instrument needed to go up from where it is.
Yeah,
Can
let me
those-
I'll take the guitar out and show you. I can raise or lower the guitar. I thought about that when we were doing it, and I knew that like in its position here, you can see I'm pushing close to the back. But if I had a thicker guitar, a thinner guitar, a guitar like a big old Martin or a Gibson acoustic where it's thicker in the back and thinner in the front. Let me release all the feet here.
That's going to add too is that I recently just found out that you can buy those brackets at most big box stores.
Oh, really?
If you go to, usually it's like in the electrical section where they'll have,
Oh, okay.
it's like C-shaped rail for hanging conduit, I think is what it is. They sell those brackets, so I don't know. Sometimes if you can find things locally, it's a little cheaper than the masters. So there's a
So-
potential.
Here you can see the feet. These are actually the feet from my original wooden early wine neck jig that I pilfered from that. So I'm still cobbling parts together off of that, but I can raise and lower these feet to whatever height I need to do whatever guitar would be necessary. And you can see, I've got holes drilled in all sorts of places wherever I feel I need to add something to the jig. I just drill a new hole and put a new little pedestal for another finger, or I could put another hole down, or I could put almost anything I want to the thing. But so this allows me to move. What did you call it? The Z-axis? Was that what it was called? The Z-axis?
That's what I referenced it as. Yeah.
Okay.
Nerd.
I still don't have my 3D printer working, which
Who
means
said that?
I
Who
don't-
said nerd?
I don't understand the terminology
You
yet.
would say that.
You need to start thinking. You're gonna do testing.
All right, let me move this thing out of the way.
Doug, while you're moving, I was messing with a little thing yesterday in the little the little handles, and I was trying to think if there was a way to like make them, I don't know, to add either like a Phillips type hole or a flathead type hole or even a nut on the end of those so you could put an attachment on a drill to, like when you're putting your long pieces in there.
Oh, you could, yeah.
When you're doing 30 of them, it'd just be cool to kind of get them close and then put your handle on.
Yeah, I
Uh,
suppose you could. I mean, the handles come right off.
You
So
could just put a screw in one of the knobs.
Yeah, that's true too.
Oh, a screw. There you go. I didn't even thought of that. That's really simple.
So, and I just this,
You can put one in each.
yeah, this just resides right next to where the jig sits on the wall. So when I need it, I can just add components as I want to go. I'll get that out of the way. So next up is this guy. And once again, everything in my life has a 1 3/4 pipe sticking out of it. This here is something I came up with, which is just a variation on a theme. It is my binding scraping jig. I love my McCrosty binding trimmer for cutting the height of binding. I've never had good luck with it for cutting the thickness of binding, because if the binding is too tall for me, I have a tendency to get it winds up wiggling while it's going its way through, and I wind up with chatter marks, and I wind up with uneven in thickness throughout. So this I came up with just as a way of, and it's same kind of thing, just cobbled together from parts I have around the shop. Here I have 2 threaded rods coming up out of the bottom of this thing that are attached right through it mechanically. This rides up and down. It's got a scraper blade on it that I turn a hook on to use it as like a cabinet scraper. I can feed my binding through here. I can put in whatever size binding I want, because I have 2 round guides that I can squeeze and tighten to whatever position I want. I have the same thing going through the front. And when this is tightened down to the height I want it, I just pull my binding through. And you can see that I get wonderfully thin shavings off the binding, and I can go down by a thousandth of an inch at a time to scrape it to just the right thickness for whatever I'm replacing, because I want to do as little touch up as humanly possible. So if I'm working on a replacement piece for
Doug, how is that blade attached?
it is merely, it's a let me get right down in there.
I made something like that, but not that fancy.
Does it have some flex to it if you're pulling on it?
Nope. This is really hard. I've got 2 screws right at the top there. You can even hear it whistling at you.
Are you putting the hook on just like on a sharpening stone, or are you burnishing it? Or?
I do it the same way I do it when I do when I'm using a blade as a hand scraper. Pick that up. Let me grab a razor blade.
And are you setting this with little thickness gauges, or are you just measuring it after each pass with a caliper?
I'll show you that in a second. There are 2 sets of wheels. So all I'm doing for the hook, I'll just grab a regular razor blade and show you. Same trick I showed off at the Ding Kings this weekend. Just take a razor blade. I take a dental tool that has the little grippy things on it here, and I just stroke it like I'm burnishing a cabinet scraper. Now I have a hook on this side. I'll have a hook on this side and a smooth side on this side, and that'll go in hook facing in. So when I'm pulling this through, just tighten down a little bit on these wheels, and I pull through. And it takes a little bit of time, but I can dial in, and sometimes it takes several passes. If I were to make this differently today, and I might still make this change, I might put the blade around the backside so it hits the blade first rather than being pushed by the blade out front. But once I'm down,
Are you able to just turn it around on yours?
I could turn this around, but then I'd have to take the blade off and turn the blade around, and I was being lazy.
Sure.
But here, I've got just a couple of through knobs giving me my downward pressure, which is where the blade is cutting from. It's cutting from putting downward pressure on it. Underneath, and this is just a piece of wood with the blade on it, you can see how fine the shavings are that I'm getting from this. It's just, it just takes off such a little nice even stroke every time. And then here, I have a couple of larger through knobs that allow me to set the base of the height of the part that holds the blade. So here I can control this independently. I can take more off of one side than the other and have a little trapezoidal shape of the triangle to be, or the rectangle to be wider on one side. So if I got a piece of binding that, I've got this side of the shape and it's coming up to the top of the guitar that's got a recurve cut and it gets thinner at the top and thicker at the bottom for whatever reason, I can just fit that right in to that. And so this rides up and down on these two pieces here. I got it.
Do you have to adjust both the top and the bottom on both each time you lower it?
Well, the way I set this when I first use it, I set my binding through it and I set the depth so this sits right down on the binding, and I bring the feet up to where it comes into contact with the bottom of the block, and so the block is sitting on the binding supported by the two wings that way. Then I look at it staring straight down, into the gap so I can see whether or not this is parallel and cutting parallel with the way the binding is sitting on the center block. Once I've got that there, I just put these two wings on, these two knobs on the posts. And that allows me to tighten it down.
But it's not gonna last forever.
So I can cut the end graft of a guitar. I can cut the, if I'm cutting like an end graft piece to replace something.
That could be on a drill press.
Speed though, speed is. And it works well for small.
A little bit of pressure brings down the blade a little bit harder, and I just get a nice, and I get a beautifully uniform finish on the outside of the binding. That once it's thickness to where I want it, I can just virtually glue it on. I can undercut it by a couple of thousandths to make room for whatever drop fill of whatever finish I'm going to put on there. So that's this puppy. It's not necessarily, you know, I wasn't the first one to come up with the idea of scraping a piece of binding with a razor blade, but that's my version of that.
Who's over there? Oh,
Go ahead. I'm
no, go
sorry.
ahead.
What were you going to say?
That's really clever. Could you do something silly like set it to a thickness gauge before you start, and then have
easy.
that
Sure,
final
yeah.
setting?
Yeah, it depends on how much you want to take off in one pass. I
Yeah.
always figured I would let it go light duty,
Sure.
you know. The last one that I've got is, I forget who named this one, but this is, I think maybe Danny West, but this is the Shiminator 2000. This one is, this one I made this jig out of laziness. I think the only other one that exists, if I'm not mistaken, is Danny West made one.
There's two.
This one I made finally out of laziness. When shimming, when doing a neck reset and shimming the dovetail, you know, I know there are two schools of thought. Some people shim the mortise, some people shim the tenon. From a vintage standpoint, I guess, you know, the idea is that you would always want to glue the shims onto your tenon and then cut the shims while you're trimming the tenon to match the mortise, so that you're not constantly making a dovetail on a guitar that's worth a lot of money, smaller and smaller and smaller as it goes through neck reset after neck reset in its life. And then there's times where I do both. I do shimming on the tenon, I do shimming on the mortise. I'll shim on the mortise. That's the way I originally learned how to do it, where you glue the shims into the mortise, and then you either cut the tenon to fit the shims, which was always the easiest to do, or you can try to cut the shims once they're in the mortise, but that's always a pain in the butt, and usually leads to a fair amount of errors. But one of the things I had noticed over the decades was that I found myself gluing shims into mortises more than I was gluing them onto tenons out of laziness, because it was just so much easier to do. It's so much easier to take a guitar that has a dovetail, put your shims in, drop in a block that fits, squeeze it in, and your shims are glued in and you can walk away. I always found that with dovetails, whenever I was gluing it on, trying to put the dovetails onto the tenon, and then even if I made trapezoidal blocks to try to hold them in place, you're always fumbling with, you know, trigger clamps or smaller clamps to hold it in two places, and then hold it and keep it from sliding up. And you glue them in, you get them, they're always falling on the floor, and it's this exercise in frustration that I'd come in the next day, I'd take all the clamps off, and I'd find the shim moved up and glided up, a quarter of an inch, and then I had to cut it off and do it all over again. And out of laziness and just frustration, it was just easier for me. I found myself opting for this more and more because it was stupid and easy. And even on jobs where I'd said, I should probably do the tenon on that rather than the mortise. But screw it, this is too easy to do. So I found myself, just out of guilt, saying there's got to be a better way to do that. So this is what I came up with. So I can lay my neck in here.
Shiminator 2000.
Shiminator 2000.
Yeah.
I lay this down in here, drop that down to hold the fingerboard extension. This one comes down to hold the heel in place, or I can even use it to glue on a heel cap. Then I can glue my shims up, slide them right onto the tenon. I can slide these in. These are the same feet that are on the Clampton jig. Slide these in to push the shims in place. I can use where did I put them? Up to there. I can use the same type of polycarbonate sheets that I used on the sides for the Clampton jig, to push against my shim. Glue dries, clean up the squeeze out, and I can walk away and it's done, and it's never going to move anywhere. And then I just take this out and start trimming my dovetail like I'm supposed to, without feeling guilty. So that's the Shiminator 2000, and I can strap the neck in there. I've used it to fix cracked heels and line those up. I've used it to glue on heel caps before the neck gets glued on, and that's what that puppy looks like.
Doug, I have a question.
Shoot.
That orange strap, I have something like that for my skis. Where did you get that?
These are from a company called Titan Straps. They're delightful. They're like bicycle straps, I think.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, Nate Wood. I love these. I use them all over the shop. Nate Wood turned me on to a company called something I don't ever pronounce correctly, but that's the company. Voile,
Okay.
Voila, something like that. This, I recently started getting these because they're 25 inches long. They're only like $7 on Amazon. And I use them for lots of stuff. This is the strap that I use on the proper workstation to hold the peg head support down. So they originally used the Titan straps. Those were available from McMaster Car. I used them here for my crowning bench. They are the strap that I now use on the proper workstation, for the peg head support, or you can use it for the neck hold down over here. They're all over my shop. I've been using them for years, and they have never failed. They virtually never break. They'll hold a ton of weight, and I use them for lots and lots and lots of things. I heard people who ride bicycles use them too, but I wouldn't know anything about that. So anyway, those are my 3 jigs.
Who's next?
Next up, I want to go to Ohio to my buddy Dan and Mike Brower. What do you got to show us, Dan?
Two. Hi, Doug.
Oh, hey TK, how you doing?
It's great. Can you hear us?
Can hear you just fine. So I've got you spotlighted.
On the camera here. Okay. This will roll around. They're not fastened into these little holes. Okay. But if you press down, it'll work. Yeah. Let's start over there. Okay. Okay.
If anybody's joining late that just joined the Patreon, we're recording this, so don't worry, you won't miss out on a single thing. I don't know if some people were struggling to get into the Zoom call.
Oh, I did.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Can you see this?
Probably need to move in just a skosh.
Oh, okay, I know what we're looking at. This is awesome.
I bought this because Frank Ford has a couple of them. I'm not even sure what he does with all of them, but it's a really accurate little drill press that has made by Electromecano. Electromecano. Electro ELECTRO -Mecano.
I'm writing it down.
In Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I don't know if they make them anymore, but you can find them online. And it's variable speed.
For anybody that doesn't know, you're not hearing that because Zoom is editing out the noise, but it probably was going.
This fixture originally was a prototype for a slotting bridge pins. So you'd take solid bridge pins that weren't fluted and slot them yourself. And I like to slot them individually so they really fit snug on each diameter of the string. And this was the prototype, and this was so long ago that it was turned down because the bearing was too expensive. But it's only about 35 or 40 bucks. So instead of selling this, we made a cheaper one with aluminum. It didn't have a linear bearing. And it kind of worked, and then we dropped it. So it's got a block that's tapered for a bridge pin, and you can
Probably pretty accurate.
now you can you can turn the bridge pin if you want to make it wider and just use one bit. But then this year I thought, how cool it would be if I could tap onto the end of this block and make it so it cut nut slots. And it does beautifully. And then I just slide it over. It's got pressure on the clamp. Now I'm just using one bit here as a demonstration. I'm going to put some set screws on the back to tilt it. Right now it's tilted up on the block so that it's actually cutting deeper on the backside and less on the front. but it really makes for me getting accurate slots a lot easier, especially the older I get and the worse my eyes get. And it leaves very little work to do afterwards.
So what kind of bit are you running in that to do that?
I have a whole bunch of just round dental burrs, little ones, big ones. I can also use any kind of dental burr. It can be a tiny one.
Mm-hmm.
Like for a first string, second string. These little guys. And it's just, it's also fun to do.
So Dan, do you just pre-mark it out with the ruler first and then just go through on your pencil lines?
Yeah, I just pre-mark it with whatever the width of the strings has to be. And I'm even going to improve this. I just made this last year and went with it. But it's going to be a little different when I get time to play with it. And I can take a little hammer, and it's pretty tight, and I can tap on it if I just want to move it a little bit. It's just a fun tool to have.
Cool. Very cool.
No, I'm going to go off to something else.
All right.
Any questions on that? For making a 12 string, man, it's a wonderful thing. There's a practice block. Can you see that up close?
It's not, you need to pull back a little bit. It's, yeah.
Like that?
Yeah. It wouldn't focus that close.
All right. What do you got up next, Dan?
But we're going to roll over here to right here. This is the latest addition to the Doug Proper workstation.
So what do you got going on here?
I made a prop so I could put a bolt-on neck on it, but it was too wobbly. So TK made a serious one with gussets on it, and it's all welded up, so it's super strong. And right now we're in the process of making a tail block for it so we can string it up. This is the new neck jig for me, I think.
Wow.
Not that I'll ever throw the old one out, but I can do everything I want on this. Because I think I've learned some. What?
You've got the neck bolted at the heel.
Yep.
And it's not supported anywhere else. It's just up over. There's no.
I can do whatever I want here.
Yeah. And then so you've got a pedestal, you've got the other pedestal or the other jack there fitted with a bridge.
And we're in the process of fitting it on right now. So I can string it up just like it was a surrogate body.
Yeah.
But I think this is going to be my new neck jig because it can do everything the other one does. And from using a neck jig for so many years, I learned everything I needed to know about getting the neck to in the shape I wanted to fret it.
Yeah, but the thing that strikes me there from seeing what you got there, if you had that bridge, if you bolt it to the plate, then you could switch out to a 6-string bridge if you're doing a guitar or a bass bridge if you're doing.
That's the idea. This will have 2 different bridges that will fit the same post.
And then you just slide it to the right length for whatever scale length you're dealing with, and you can do all sorts of. You've got a body neck jig there. Yeah, that's amazing.
I think it's something that Jeff might get into and want to do.
I sent him pictures of what you showed me, and he's already super jazzed about it.
So Dan, are you going to have the little push-up piece for the headstock that fits to the bar? Or are you just going to use a scissor jack?
I'll have all the push-ups I need for hold downs. I might be clamping the peg head down. Depends on what position I want it when I fret it. But sure, I don't know if I'll make dial indicators for it, but it wouldn't be hard. Just blocks with magnets.
Yeah.
So this will do everything I want it to do that the Stu Mac neck jig does in a different way.
Wow.
Yeah, the possibility Dan, you could have all your micrometers, your dial indicators on there and your little post, but you could keep the settings exact same, drop those out of the way or switch them out and put your stands on there and fret it exactly where it's at, right?
Yeah,
And it would never move.
I can hammer with this. I can slide the column along and just hammer. It's just about to get used. I haven't used it yet.
Yeah, hammering frets in on the workstation is something that was important to me to be able to do.
So that's something worth. I hope he does it.
I think
we'll
he is. He's already hot to go. He's waiting for you to give me dimensions on what you got going on there.
You know if he's going to use the same materials, or is he? I think a heavier post might be good. We ran into some flex issues initially with the original parts.
Yeah, I don't know. He can vary the thickness of the steel he's using. He can also use, you put those. What did you call them?
Gussets.
Gussets.
I think that's what they're called.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll send this to Jeff when they're done, and it won't be long. Then he'll know what to do.
Yeah, I sent him some pictures of it. He's already got some ideas of how he wants to do it.
I think heights where I want them. That's
Yeah.
changed a little bit. It was going up and down and doesn't need to. TK measured it all up and made this to fit.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can move on.
That's exciting. So I think what we're going to do now is.
Did Mike have something to show? Was Mike going to show something?
Yeah, we got Mike in the top there with you. What do you got for us, Mike?
We're not that far yet. I danced. It's still the dance show.
Oh, what do we got next, Dan? You got other surprises for us.
We're gonna look at this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that forward. This is something over here that I found worthwhile making over the years for teaching people how to work inside guitars. And also so I could get inside guitars and make calls and fixtures that fit perfectly.
Oh, look at that.
So these are all different bracing patterns. And they come off, you can clean them. They're just screwed on. So it's a good way to learn and teach people how to do this work, but it's killer to make calls.
So how are the braces adhered to the plexi?
They are super glued on.
Oh wow.
I can pop them off when I want to and pretend to re-glue one.
I didn't realize you had so many of those. I saw a couple of those when we were out there in Ohio, but I didn't realize you had like a whole fleet.
There's a whole fleet of them because they're all slightly different plans. This one has the side that comes out of it, and we've done a lot of videos with that at StuMac. And I've just kept it for the same reason. But it's not hard to get scrap sides and glue them together and make some of these.
I have a feeling I know exactly what's going to be happening during the bracing episode of the Dan and Doug show. I'll be
little foreshadowing.
I'll be watching.
Hey, over here, let's see. I'm gonna unplug this so you can wheel in here. You can get back in there.
Dan, what's that little mill?
This one? That took the place of the one I sold you. I got this from TK.
Oh, it's cool.
It's quite amazing. This has a column that's like 4 feet deep. You can crank this head up many feet.
Cool.
You need to get guitars in.
I couldn't resist it. We're coming around behind this other bench. You'd laugh if you saw the roller cart.
So what's going on here?
Is that the one we dropped?
Hmm?
I said, is that the one we dropped?
No. What's going on? Oh, this is off. This is one of those little, the first one was from Grobet. It's a little grinder. And it's set up for, I'll slide it out of the way. If I'm fretting the guitar and I want to make the ends fit right inside the binding or right to it, for whatever reason, and press them down in, I can cut and fit all the ends beforehand, so when it goes in, it's already shaped on the end, and it can press right down to the binding or overhang it. Can you see what I'm showing here?
Yeah.
You see. And let me see in there. You can also zoom in. I thought you could.
You should be able to pinch and zoom in.
It's not working for something. Maybe
Yeah, I couldn't make it work.
That's closer.
There you go.
so I can put a little magic marker on the ends of these frets and strike a line so it's right where I want it to end. And maybe I want it to overhang the binding. In this case, I don't. I'd cut it where I want to cut it. I'd cut most of it off. And then I'm going to go over to the little grinder and grind it right down to the scribed line on the ink.
Dan, do you have little slots for the fret tang to sit in there while you're grinding it?
Right there.
Yeah, you got like 4 or 5 slots right there.
So I can use a whole bunch of the face of the sandpaper. We're tight on space here.
Oh, you're putting your round over on there too.
Then buff it down here.
Oh, look at that.
That's an all-in-one station.
So how come this was never in the Stu Mac catalog? This seems like a no-brainer.
And then it's just, this has also been run through the fret tang barber to take the tangs down. And it's going to press tight into this slot, which is a very tight slot on an old Mosrite. And I can do the whole job, and then I don't even have to do the ends when it's done.
That's amazing.
One more thing.
And you got that neck bolted into to a jig itself too, right?
Well, the neck is so squirrely that we took a whole lot of wood off the top of it, bolted into this stand, the peg head screwed down. I actually took this and put it on the belt sander and flattened it like this. I've done it a lot of times. It's a quick and dirty. And I had all the tension on the rod that I could get to get this neck straight. And
Wow.
right now, like pulling it down here and pressing it up there with the rods the way they are, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna come out with a flat neck that was hard to get, straight neck. And I'm gonna press the frets in real tight. And we'll see how that comes out, but I'm pretty confident it'll work. One more little fun thing. I think I'll just move this and figure out how to do it. I can do this here. I'm just working left-handed. If I'm cutting a fret slot for a lot of particular reasons, I want to widen it or I want to cut it. Even if I wanted to, it's hard to explain the situations, but when you see it, you'll figure it out. I have a curved radius block with magnets, so I can.
I use that. It works really well. Dan sent me one for Christmas.
There's lots of times I use this. It's hard to even, not only on a fingerboard. I'm cutting lots of accurate little pieces and I just use that block to hold my saw. And that I've used a lot. That's a pretty new one, but I've had many.
Yeah, I got to do that too.
Those are some little jigs. And I'm going to take over on the camera now. And we're going to go to Mike.
Okay.
He's got some fine things to show here. Hey, Mike, can you unplug that cord and I'll come out that end? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, this I wanted to see in action.
Yeah.
This is our lone entry on the website right now for loose prints. We're starting to transfer them, but this was my test one for loose prints.
Yeah, I saw this in Guitarless when I was in Ohio, and I just fell in love with the idea. This thing is amazing. Go ahead, Mike, take it away.
Okay, well, I get a lot of these. They like to break there. These Chinese Epiphones like to break right there. And the first one I did, I couldn't get a good way to clamp it and make sure it was lined up correctly. So what I wound up with was a peg head that was crooked. So after some noodling and another iteration, I came up with this thing, which is made out of almost nothing. A handful of 3D printed parts, Harbor Freight trigger clamp, and a half-inch piece of square tubing from Home Depot. But between the clamp and these little adjusters here, and that's an idea from Ian. That's another way to hold that straight. That, by the way, is a ponytail rubber band.
And who had the ponytail, Mike?
Not anymore.
Oh, okay.
Not anymore. So I got plenty of these to use now.
Okay, good.
But yeah, you can. Plus, you have a good line of sight. You can see it from from every side, and works pretty good. So the first step is I do that. Use the West Systems epoxy to glue that part, and
So
give it
you're lining up the peg head how here? Because that's the part I couldn't figure out just by looking at it when I saw it. Your peg head is sitting on two pedestals there.
yeah.
I'm gonna come in here with this thing handheld.
Get in there,
Okay.
Dan. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have two pedestals there that are independently height adjustable.
Right.
And they're setting the forward edge and the back edge of the peg head.
Yeah, you're going this way.
Not only in terms of your angle, but you have a left to right
Yes.
adjustment there. So you can
Pitch it in your eye, I think.
So does the quick grip push it in?
Yeah.
Okay.
and then once you've got it all lined up, you use your trigger clamp to push in towards the body in there.
Right.
So you'd pull it back out to put glue in it and then push it back in?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's incredible.
Gets better.
Well, then, well, let's want to see this. This is my kitchen table guitar friend.
Oh, look at that. It's a sled.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Eric Magdal, did you have a question? You have your hand up.
How does this work for like log scale? Like 34 scale bass?
These little pieces slide anywhere along that that piece of square tubing. You could make that square tubing as long as you wanted. And just spread it.
So this could be universal for any guitar. It doesn't necessarily, it's not, you made it for specific to your your Epiphone guitar.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, it should work for anything pretty much.
This is great.
Very nice. By the way, the printable parts and everything is up on the new website in the with prints section if you want to print this out and make it up. There's Mike also put in very, very detailed instructions on how to construct it. It's really, really well thought out and how it's demonstrated to put it together. So
As soon as my 3D printer's up and running, I'm printing one of these.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, the next step, once that's glued together, I printed these as router guides to
Yeah.
Well, that's what it looks like when it's done.
yes, it's got two on either side and then one in the middle to tie it together, right? For kind of
yeah.
spline things.
Yeah, and this is the one that routes the little cap.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I've been pretty happy with it. I've done about 12 of them, and I haven't had any of them come apart yet.
What makes the piece that goes in there? Do you have to make that yourself?
Yeah, I carve it by hand.
Okay.
Do it on the belt sander.
Look at those seams. Perfect.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mike.
Okay.
What else you got?
Got keychains.
I'm curious about this sled that you have the guitar on. Where'd you come up with the idea for that?
I don't know. It was just from chasing a guitar around the kitchen table on a pillow like we did. And I think it was an earlier version of this I had that I wanted to be able to look at this side and look at this side and get it back to where it was comfortable to work on.
Well, I'm definitely printing up one of those peg head jigs, and then I'm going to try to figure out how to attach it right to the workstation.
Something cool that Mike and I have been working on for the last couple of years. I've been trying to get Stu Mack, Todd, Sams, and Elliot to draw the specs for different saddles to go on an ABR1 Tune-o-matic, so that you could create a 7 1/4, a 9 1/2, a 10, and a 12 just by switching the saddle pieces out.
Oh, wow.
And I have pigtails machine drawings that I gave to Mike, so he'd know the specs on it. And he's come up with, he's printed them in plastic for one thing, just for fun because he can do it. But
yeah, we made a 3D model of the base and the saddles, and just to be cute and make sure everything went together. I printed out the individual parts, and then it was just fooling around. I put all the parts together in the model and printed it out in one piece and made keychains for the Dan Erlewine team.
Oh man,
that's fantastic.
That's those all
keychains.
Are all the saddles glued in, or how are
Yeah,
those hanging in there?
It's one piece.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It was printed as one piece. So,
but there's lots of saddles that aren't glued in, and we pretty much have the sizes, and we're sending them off to Pam Rowan at Pigtail, and she's going to create them, because I find a lot of times I wish I could change the radius on a Tune-o-matic bridge without grinding the tops down.
Yeah.
And getting too low, and you can't even go lower because you hit the screw head.
that's right. We use the standard ones as the lowest ones, and all the other ones we build a little taller. So.
That's really cool. Sign me up for one of those keychains.
Be in the mail tomorrow.
I can print them on mine, can't I?
Yeah.
We'll start printing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, fellas. I think we're
back to you.
So
back to you, Doug.
Colorado. What do we got out in Colorado? We got Michael Bashkin out there. I gotta see if I can find him up here. Is he still with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Let me remove this.
I can go close that.
So I'm pinning. Am I pinning this for you, Michael, or no? Is that the right pin?
Let's pin the laptop. The one my head's on.
There you go. Okay. Let's see what you
All
got.
right. Well, I'm going to show you some jigs from guitar building. Here's a jig that I use if I'm making up some custom binding and I want to glue in the side purflings. So this allows me to put a piece of binding here, any side purflings I want, and basically the channel is protected either with a coat of like cellophane tape or light clear packing tape. And then I just put everything in here, clamps on both sides, and then I can make up any, custom binding that I don't have with any variation of side purfling I want. I don't normally make my bindings this way, but sometimes if I have a one-off where like a customer wants, say, Brazilian rosewood binding with, a Pernambuco side purfling, and I'm not going to make up a block of it, this allows me just to make up binding easily just for one guitar.
Is that all aluminum, or is that?
The base is just plywood.
Okay.
Got these inserts in the back,
Mm-hmm.
which catch these screws, and then there's just some milled slots on this aluminum, and the screws just kind of keep everything down. So,
Wow.
real simple jig. Took me, maybe an hour to make, and pretty cheap and very effective. So,
Very cool. I mean, it's
any
super,
questions?
super adjustable.
Yeah, I can make pretty big bindings too, as you can see. So, so that's the first jig, and then as long as we're this is, somewhat similar, this is a jig for gluing on the binding on a fingerboard.
Nice.
And basically, I made these big feather boards. I put some masking tape down here just to build up the edges, a couple thousand, so the binding sits below the surface of the bottom of the fingerboard, so that after the binding's glued on, I'm not milling off any thickness from the fingerboard. And then
in a situation like this, your fingerboard's already shaped and whatnot, or are you square?
I could do it either way.
Okay.
Either way. So, and then basically it's just a wedge fit, and then I just push this side up tight to the fingerboard. Whatever the taper might be, I can handle different nut widths and different widths at the 14th fret, and I just lock these down. Again, these bolts are captured just with these little T-nuts in the back here.
So that's fixed on your left side and adjustable on the right.
Exactly, right. Yeah. And then all these little fingers, I just cut them real quick on the bandsaw. I did not make any big deal out of it. So a lot of the jigs that I make, I kind of have an idea and I just want to rough it out. I make it quick, and then a good part of the time I never end up making the secondary perfect version of the jig. But this has come in handy over the years. So, and then this is more of a jig feature that I wanted to show you that I found useful. In terms of, for jigs, I sort of view them as if I don't have to break out a ruler or a caliper, that's good. And if I don't have to remember too much about the jig, that's good. So I often write myself notes on here. Sometimes I write myself positive affirmations like you're doing a great job, So keep going. So with
Shut up and get back to work, Michael.
Right. So exactly. So this jig rides in the table slot of my miter saw.
Okay.
Excuse me, table saw. And then the key here is this little mahogany block that I glued on. And what this does is this tells me exactly the blade height I need to set. So all I have to do is just set it to the top of this block, and that's it. I don't have to break out a ruler. I don't have to, measure anything or do any test cuts. If I'm at the top of this block, then it's exactly where it needs to be. The tolerance for the cut, if I'm 10 thousandths plus or minus, it's fine. So, I don't need to be down to the thousandths on the blade height. And then just so you know what this jig is for, is when I cut my my neck tenons,
Okay.
I put in some face grain splines, and so I've got the truss rod slot here. These key into these 1/4-inch pins, and basically I just make a pass, I move it to the next pin, make a pass, etc. And
Oh, so this is how you cut for the inserts in the tenon.
not quite. Let me show you a finished version. So what I'm doing here is I'm just cutting these slots for these rosewood face grain splines.
Okay.
And then my particular neck joint and hardware is I have an aluminum dowel that's tapped with 1/4-20, and so that goes up through the tenon this way, and these face grain inserts or splines really prevent the possibility of this tenon ever pulling out through the end grain. It's unlikely, but it'd be a real bummer if it happened. And you can do it. I mocked up a test where I tried to pull, this out through the end grain, and I was able to do it. And basically, what's happening mechanically is, the end grain is a bunch of straws like this, and the tenon can be basically pulled out through the straws like that. Whereas if you have face grain, there's no way that that's going to pull out, through 3 face grain splines. So that's the idea behind it, and this is the jig that I used to cut it.
Okay. So
And the real feature I wanted to show you is this. I just found these types of sort of gauge blocks glued right onto the jigs to be very handy, and just make setup a whole lot quicker.
And you just move your neck from one step to the next.
Yeah, it's just real quick. I don't clamp it on. I just have positive registration, and it just goes 1, 2, 3, then that's it.
That's wonderfully efficient.
Hey, Michael, not to do with your jig, but with your threaded insert piece. Do you fabricate that yourself? The aluminum piece with
the answer to your question is no. I have a machinist in the shop just 2 doors down from me, and he's all set up, and I think he charges me just a couple bucks. I'll show you what it looks like.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love the how it's spread out like that and hidden behind there, because that almost makes me nervous.
I think I need to get a machinist to move in 2 doors down as well.
So this is what the insert looks like.
Yeah.
And these are just tapped 1/4-20. I did spend the money, and I bought very high tolerance precision rod, so the diameter is incredibly consistent, because in the past I've just bought cheaper aluminum rod, and the width or the diameter would vary up to 5 thousandths, maybe more, even from one end to the rod to the other. And so sometimes these would slip in perfectly into my hole in the tenon, and other times they wouldn't go in at all. So I think I spent about $90 for 6 feet of this high precision rod. But I got enough for several years of guitar building here, so it was worth it to me.
Yeah.
And then I when I glue it in, I'll just rough this up with some 80 grit just to give the aluminum some tooth, and then I'll glue it in with West Systems epoxy.
Okay. And you sleep well at night knowing that's a secure that's in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't always sleep well, but that's I do what I can. So okay.
But it's other
let's
things
see.
that keep you up besides that.
Right, exactly. Doug, do you want me to keep going? I've got a couple other things I could run through them real quick, or
Sure,
if we're
that's fine. Yeah, let's see it.
okay. So this is something that I've found to be handy. This is a backlight that sits on my bench. So when I'm truing up a fingerboard, I've got a nice even backlight, and then I can move. Whoops, sorry about that. I can change the height of it really
Oh,
easy.
yeah.
And then it has a extending arm on the back. So what this does is it allows me to get over the body and yeah, just get over the body and up onto the fingerboard extension. So this has been a nice little addition to the shop. Makes fretting and fingerboard trimming go a little bit easier. And this is, I've got a bunch of these. This is, I guess I would call this a jig. And it's just a piece of ebony or some of the, the harder woods I have in the shop. And I slot them to fit over my brace ends. And then what I'll do after I've glued the braces on, either to a top or a back, depending where I am, I'll just set this down. So this face will be resting against the plate. The brace will be sticking up here. And then this thickness is the height of the foot of the brace where it's going under the lining.
Right.
So I just rest my chisel against this face and I can just pare down right to this face. And, it's quick, it's accurate. These are incredibly cheap to make. You don't have to buy them on McMaster-Carr. And, so these cutouts are for me to get around other braces that are already glued onto the back. And yeah, so another little jig.
And the caliper stays in the drawer.
That's right. Exactly. You got the right idea. Caliper stays in the drawer. And then the last thing that I'm going to show you is, all right, I'll try and make this quick, but this is my X-bracing jig. And I have a blade on the table saw. I think it's called a grooving blade. And it's a 1/4-inch blade. The exact width of it is, or kerf is 0.247. So when I make my braces, I'll thin them out to 247. And then this rides in the miter slot on the table saw. And this is an adjustable fence on this pivot. And so I can control the angle of the X brace. Most of the time I have it set with this pin, but these are for my different models of guitars, which have a different splay of the X braces. And so this moves, and then basically just run it across the table saw, one pass through the blade, and then I've got a very well cut notch in the X brace. This is just a little safety feature for when the blade exits on the back, that there's no way that I can get my hand. Well, I could get my hand in there if I really wanted to, but I have a positive affirmation written right here telling me not to stick my hand in the blade. So
That's
yeah.
good.
And since there are
by the way, the one of those that we had at Breedlove had a sign on it that said "Got thumbs."
Oh, yeah. So
I'm guessing that since there's no blood stains on that jig, that your positive affirmation is working just fine.
Yeah, not yet. I usually manage to bleed on a little bit on every guitar, but so far it's it's not of the quantity where I can't just wipe it off. And then just real quick, I'll show you these last two neck jigs since we were kind of talking about necks. So, and Doug, this is where I've asked you about the straps. So this jig routes the tenon.
Yeah.
And again, I've got the 1/4-inch pins. This is how what the tenon looks like when it comes off the CNC, which is not the final shape. So I've got these 2 1/4-inch pins here. The neck snaps into those pins. And then here I've got the tenon route, which I just use a router template bit. And where I really like those straps is I have to make sure that I'm all the way forward and that this is clamped down. And so putting a strap here and a strap here, I usually end up with tape and some clamps, but I think the straps will work more quickly. Because when I use this jig in a position,
You could put
it
you hold
sits, grabs onto a bench here, and then I
Okay.
just come in with the router on the top, and Mhm.
So you're just leaning that into the bench,
So
and not, are you clamping it to the bench at all?
yes. In other words, I'll put a clamp on the neck, and then it clamps to my bench this way.
Sure.
So I've got a clamp on the neck, on the jig, and then to the bench, and I do that as well here. That's what this hole's for.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then to route the female part, this is how I cut the tenon in the body, or excuse me, the mortise in the body. And what I've done is I've actually relieved this to accept the curve of my neck block, but I added an adjustable piece here, which sits in a little groove. And when I do cutaways, which I mostly do, then I can move this in and out to put the tenon exactly where I want it based on the neck width at the cutaway. So,
And that
and then
registers that against the inside of the cutaway.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then these tape shims just sort of act to counter how much I've faced off the top so that it catches, where the neck extends over the body, so that it's basically planar. So anyway, real simple jigs, and I found these to be very effective and making better guitars in less time. So, and I think that's about it for me. But I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
From Joe H. Flat top table saw blade for box. I just lost it. It went somewhere.
I can get it back up. Flat top table saw blade used for box joints. The top of each tooth is flat versus the more typical angled. So yeah, more like a.
Okay. Yeah, I think what Joe's referring to was I did have the table saw blade that I cut the splines with custom ground so that it gives me a flat cut at the top. Answer to Stuart. So something else.
Cool.
Michael, I was just going to talk in relation to your brace thinning jig, that little piece of ebony that you had for thinning the ends of. Yeah, I got turned on by Tom Bills a while ago. He just made stock blocks for his bench top where he drilled holes in the bench top and had a jig to make any jig to fit in those holes, and then make heighted stop blocks so you can put anything in there and just plane down to exactly any stop block, and you can make stop blocks for anything, any shape, any trapezoidal, whatever you want. But then you have something to go to at the end. I thought was one of the most brilliant things I'd seen in a jig like that.
Yeah, it's a nice idea. Definitely.
So your whole thing with jigging up is all of those repeatable steps that would be time consuming. You just, you have something that you can just whip up, and then every time you have to do that step, you don't have to stop and refigure everything out.
That's the general approach. It only took me 20 years to figure that out. Yeah, but I'm getting there.
Thank you, Michael. I definitely want
Thank
to
you.
go on here, and we're going to stay in Colorado, and we're going to talk to Bo, who's another builder.
Hello.
Bo, you still there? Oh, look at him. He's got the nice camera. What's that about?
Is my audio all right?
It is.
Okay. So I've got about 5 or 6 things, but they're really quick. The first one is how I laminate sides. So I have my mold here, and I laminate my sides in the actual mold, and I just use a packer, which is 3/4 inch ply, and I just screw it in there temporarily, and then laminate my sides in in this, and this isn't this is separated, but it seems to work really, really well, and it saves on having to have other jigs to laminate with, which I'm sort of don't have much space, so I need all the space I can get.
So is
The
that your
next
block?
one,
Is that your blocking mold too, or?
yeah, everything. So
Okay.
Everything is
okay.
Made in the thing that it's going to live in until it gets back and sides put on it.
Okay, cool.
I mean, back and top. Next one is this. Can you see that?
Yeah.
It's
You've got a couple of
basically a
dowels.
square of plywood with some half dowel.
Wait a second.
And what that does, instead of, I threw out all my calls, which were custom made for each shape, and these just fit in to any shape
cool.
that you need.
And that'll find its own index. It'll find its own center, no matter
Yeah.
what kind of curve you're in.
Yeah, so that's for a uke, and I've got some guitar-sized ones. I use the uke ones for the guitar upperbouts, and I also have a couple here and here. So I usually put maybe 3 or 4 or 5 when I'm putting the blocks in, and it just makes for a really handy universal side call.
And that'll work on an inside curve or outside curve, right?
Yeah, yeah. So there or there.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Change.
That'll also work for convex or concave, because you can use that on the inside of the inside of the rim too, right?
Yeah. So there or there.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was I wrote a Guild of American Lutherie article on it, and I accidentally came up with it. But I'll take an accidental.
You just changed my life, I think.
Next one is kind of a simple one, but I've always wanted a really bright light to work on inside of instruments, and they would never. Then this weren't like the sun, and I came up with this. It's a super lo-fi, dodgy thing, but it's a bit of cardboard, and it's just got LEDs all over it. So that's 16 feet of LEDs, and it's super bright, and you can put it in a sound hole and you can bend it so it goes into anything. So it's really good.
So I saw you illuminate the inside of a guitar with one of those.
Yeah.
And you can virtually see like every brace.
Yeah. I can do it actually. I'll show you.
So
yeah, it's how I find secrets in instruments. Secrets. So here's a guitar top I had to retop. I might need to, hang on a sec.
Oh yeah.
So,
well, there's your problem. Get the 3/4 of the tone is missing off of that guitar.
God, I just killed my eyes. Yeah, so that's a really good thing. It costs about $20 for all those lights.
So did you just take a huge string of like LED lights and kind of just glue them all up on a piece of cardboard? Is that what you did?
Yeah. So you can see there are more fancy ways to do it if you want to solder little jumper leads, but I just twisted them.
Just jumped them, yeah.
Yeah. But
Oh,
they-
so
there are
they-
cut points here. Like that's a cut point, and you could, just
Cut it
have
and
them all
solder a
finishing
wire
there
on,
and
yeah.
little leads, but that's fine.
Oh, so these things come adhered to a strip.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was in a roll of, just a spool, and you can buy them in 16 feet and 30 feet and whatever.
I got some and it crapped out on me like almost immediately. Like the plastic started getting funky and I was kind of gun shy about getting them, but I'd like to get that link because it looks like you've had those for a while, right?
Yeah, for, I don't know, probably 2 years.
Okay.
And this is self-adhesive back, but I think I also CA glued it on. The only trouble I found was the keep. So this side's almost 3 inches wide. The only thing I found is when I put this in here and I have the wide side up, it can hit the top brace and sort of get stuck. So I'd keep it to like, probably best would be 3 panels of 2 inches, something like that.
So where did you find these LEDs?
Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been meaning to do a more in-depth video on it because it seems let people enjoy it. Another thing I kind of accidentally found was another mystery finding thing. So pretend that's a top, pretend that's a crack. And it's pretty, assume that's right down the back of the, the end of a guitar or something. It's really hard to find exactly where to put your cleat until I got this stuff.
Or what is
and
that?
This is like magic. So what I usually do with cleats, I bought these really crappy, not very strong magnets from Home Depot. I mean, Harbor Freight. And so,
Are they what, ceramic magnets or something?
they're, I don't know, whatever the cheapest type of magnets are.
Probably ceramic, yeah.
So I, just say I need one of Dan's fake tops. Actually, I can have it.
Wait a minute, I'll go.
All right. Pretend there's a crack right there. And I want to put a cleat right there. So now I can tell exactly where my magnet is.
Oh, look at that.
Joe Glazer has that.
What is that? What's this thing you're using here?
It's a magnet paper. So, it just is super handy to locate stuff. So if I want to glue up this crack and I want to put a cleat right on it, I'll clamp it up here with like the crappy magnets. And, I'll just make sure that it's right on the line where I want it. And then I can just reach in and put the cleat on this side of it. So I know it's going to fall right on the center.
Yeah, you just use your magnets as an index then. But you can pre-position them from outside the guitar rather than having to learn how to look at everything backwards and upside down in a mirror.
Yeah. Another thing I've done is
you're
double-sided tape a cleat onto this, and then
Sharon is making a shopping list, by the way.
I double-sided tape a cleat onto this, and then you can locate it right on the crack.
Oh, look at that.
So it really is magical. So magnet paper, it's like $7 for a sheet of that. It's really cheap.
I would just start putting cleats in things that didn't even need them just because it looks really fun.
You will become a cleaterist. The next one isn't a jig, but it's just a cool tool that I use to quickly take down braces. I think it's used in art framing, and I literally bought this off a crackhead off Facebook Marketplace. But it's
What is this?
the brand name is that. Is that?
Precision sander. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a bloody heavy hand cranked wheel, sanding wheel, and so it just minimizes dust. And if I'm doing like a finger brace or something between the X brace and here, like instead of going back and forth to the sander out there where I do all the dusty work or something where I want to quickly fit the length of this, I just knock it down with this by hand, and there's no dust in the air, and it's really quick, sort of 80 grit sandpaper. And I think these new are about 120, but if you find one cheap, they're worth having.
Violin people love their hand crank disc sanders.
They would.
I saw Iris has got one of those.
Oh, does she?
Mm-hmm.
This next jig I stole off the internet somewhere, and it sort of reminded me of Mike Bauer's jig. This is for doing splines or splints in headstocks.
Yeah.
And so, say the nut is here, and you want to put the part where you want the deepest cut to go right in the center, and then pretend that's got a laminate trimmer on there. Then you just roll this back and forth until you get the depth that you want. And why I like doing that type, you get a really long spline, and you can get it, if you dial it in the location of this to that, you can put the deepest part right where you need it, and you can go right down to the headstock veneer.
Yeah, plus instead of making a straight cut, you've got the luxury of a much longer spline for the sake of stability.
Yeah, the end of it is spread out as opposed to a butt joint at the end when people just drop them in and run them.
Yeah,
which makes 2 weak spots on either end when they go down.
I think. I mean, you could come back in and reroute a square end, because I think a square end is probably a better idea. But I do like the depth of this and the length of it as well. But you could just kind of minimize that to like a really shallow cut here, and then come back in with a square cut here. So I don't know what's best, but
no,
that's what I've been doing.
Spread out is better as opposed to just one new weak place.
Yeah.
I had also, have you tried doing that for the way you have your setup? You could do that to make a perfect back strap to remove all your material, and then go back in, use a similar jig maybe to cut your piece to drop in.
Yeah, I've got a dodgy way to hold the neck on. It's probably best to have two of these here and here. The only thing you got to look out for is these things stick out taller than this, so that needs to be ground off. But yeah, you could move the neck this way or something, or just have a way to move the router. Yeah, you could do that for sure.
You'd have a uniform shape to be able to then cut a uniform piece to drop in there. That'd be quicker than having to fit them each time, which is a pain.
How are those rods secured to the jig? The ones that were getting in your way?
These?
Yeah.
They're just like, I don't know.
Just reverse them. reverse them, and instead of using a wing nut, use a knob, and then you put knobs on the other side of the thing. You have 4 feet that you
Yeah.
can just to pull down, and then you got your wing nuts and your rods out of the way.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Wing nuts.
Wing nut, and this one I measured is about 9-inch radius.
Okay.
This, and what I do a test cut. I can't find it, but I did a test cut with the router to the depth of the deepest part, and then on that scrap piece, once you've got the routed channel, you cut it in half. Then you've got like a shape from which to extract the perfect shape of the insert to go into the 2 spline cuts, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Michael Bashkin mentioned something about brace ends, so I'll show you what I do with this. So this is to cut my brace end. There should be another one here, but it fell off. So that's to get like about a 6 mil brace end for the backs and for the upper and lower transverse brace. And then this rides on here, and it's just a corresponding depth to match that. Just a kind of a simple 2-part routing system.
I think that's like remarkably similar to how we did it at Breed Love.
Yeah. The last one is my favorite one.
This you showed me, and I love this.
Yeah. So this is a piece of snakewood, it was just a cracky bit of snakewood, which is another way of saying snakewood. But it's a block of, I'm going to do a little demo with this. It's just a block of snakewood, and it's got a 45-degree cut here, but it also has that.
You got your notch in there.
Yeah. And what that's for is to focus.
There we go.
So I put my black, white, black in there, and this end, probably for about, I don't know, a quarter of an inch or something, is slightly under the depth of the thickness of the purfling. And so when I extend it out and lay it on the bench, it kind of self-clamps. So I can barely feel that is kind of raised there, but it seems to be enough to work.
So did you originally cut the channel to that depth and then deepen the rest of the channel?
I think I did. I just routed this channel, and then I made this square and cut that. And then I just kept sanding to get that right. And then I sanded this face to get that 45-degree. And then I just sanded this on the, the sander to just get it exactly right. So I'll do a little demo. So it's to get perfect miters every time, and it really does help. I don't know if this is going to be.
Yep.
Okay, so So I just put the purfling in here, clamp it down just by hand, remove all the magnets that are stuck to my chisel. And then I just slide the chisel on the face of this. And then if it's a sort of a right angle cut, I usually take 2 passes. And I know that is going to be absolutely perfect now. So if I do this other one, oops. I forgot this black, white, black has a 20 thou on one side and a 10 thou on the other side, so it didn't line up.
You got to come out a little bit. You're too close.
Yeah, well,
a little bit farther away.
Assume that it's perfect. it's a bit too tricky to get that close up, but yeah, it's a really simple, easy jig to make and works well.
I love that. I'm going to make one of those because it's just, it makes it so easy to just quickly cut that way.
Yeah, if I want to make a few more, but so the purfling goes in flat like that. You could have another channel to make it sort of, the high side.
Yeah.
And then you could also have one that way as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could do another 2 cuts and make it 2 times as good.
Yeah. Any of the whippersnappers that are with us or Mike Brower could probably 3D print that too.
Yeah. 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 And the channel depth doesn't have to be exact. It just has to be very slightly less. I may have overcut it and then put some CA glue in it or something just to fatten it out or to make it less deep quicker than sanding it. And that's probably easy to do if you've got this at a nice 45-degree angle. Just pack it out with some CA glue instead of sanding the whole bottom. I think that's it for my show and tell.
I think it was awesome, Bo. Thank you. All right.
Excellent showing and telling.
We're going from Colorado to Texas. Is that the wrong one?
Can you see me?
Well, let me find you. I think I pinned the wrong one.
James and I should combine ours together.
Yeah, let me find James up here. Really? Oh, there he is. Replace. There we go. There's James. And we're going to find. Oh, there you are. So you two have been working on something together.
Yeah, but that means mostly James.
Wow.
Oh, I just lost James. Wait a minute.
That means me saying, "Hey James, what about this?" and then and then him working for like 12 hours on something.
In my experience, the idea is harder to come by than the
Really?
the labor.
Oh, I come up with them all the time.
I know you do. Yeah. So you want to?
I think.
Right.
Yeah, we could do the one.
So Ian texted me and said, "What do you think about this idea?" He needed to reinforce.
Yeah, I had
that had broken several times.
Yeah, recidivist peghead brake on a 50s Les Paul that the guy didn't want to do a backstrap or anything visible. So I was like, how about if I pull the fingerboard off and then we'll put carbon fiber rods on either side of the truss rod into the peg head, and it actually turned out pretty slick. James made me this drill bushing, and he 3D printed it. And then how did you make the drill bushings to go in it into it? Did you
Yeah, the original drill bushings were full length steel rods that I drilled out myself.
And then the really cool thing is he put this thing where you could put another rod in there, or the drill bit if you prefer, and actually peek at what your angle is, so you could really line it up on the peg head accurately.
Okay. That's cool.
So the groove on the side is at the same angle as the drill bushings.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can see this, but I'll pause this really quick. At the first part of the video, you can see that I've actually drilled through, and I've got the drill going all the way through to past the E1st and E6. So those rods are going into the peg head past the first set of tuners. So it'll repeat, but yeah, you can see right there that that's the rod going in and out through there. So yeah, so that was super duper exciting. And when it was all said and done, there's my dog. When it was all said and done, it was very, like, it was noticeably rigid. Like the headstock had been, I think that it had been glued together maybe like probably 4 times by the time we'd done this. So this was the 4th gluing. And like I really like grabbed a hold of it after we got those rods glued in there. And it was quite rigid. I think, like, moving forward, I would be worried if it took a hit, like you might get a crack around the rod or something like that, but I don't think it's gonna break quite in the same way. So yeah, that was a exciting result.
What would you think about trying something with a little more flex to it that would move with the wood?
Then carbon fiber?
Yeah.
I think you could. The carbon fiber that I used, actually Joel Wilkins gave me some carbon fiber that was actually quite rigid. But this stuff, the pultruded stuff from Dragon Plate, I don't know if you can see that, but it's got a serious amount of flex to it.
Cool.
So one of the things I'd say too that I did that was interesting was I used West Systems, but I also added some of the filler that's supposed to give you better adhesive properties. And I was really conscious to like dip, get the rod all covered in the epoxy and everything. And I was like really conscious to like slide it in and out and really make sure that I was getting the rod surrounded and everything. And originally I had planned on going back in and putting a second rod, a smaller rod down the middle of the first rod, because I was actually thinking that maybe I didn't want any rigidity and I wanted more strength, just to keep it from maybe flexing and cracking a little bit more.
Are those rods hollow or solid?
Yeah, these are hollow.
Okay.
So anyway, so there was another rod that I could slip down in there that I bought. And when I put it down in there, I realized that the epoxy, even with the filler, had capillaried back up the tube a fair way, like probably about a quarter of the run it had capillaried back up. And it really gave me a lot of confidence in that repair, also to know that the rod was completely rounded, and very, very well adhesed on the exterior, but then also that the adhesive was going back up the tube. I felt like something in my brain went, "Ooh boy, I bet that's strong." So anyway, haven't heard back from the customer, so that's exciting. Well, that's we'll call that a win. And he's the kind of guy that would call too. So
would you fill the rest of the rod with a leftover epoxy with a syringe?
I didn't, and I probably wouldn't. To Eb's point about the flexibility, I think that a little bit of flexibility would be good. Just kind of like going with the same principle of why airplane wings are flexible. There's strength and deflection to a certain point, I think. So plus I think it would be all right because, you know, like I think maybe having it more flexible at the peg head would maybe, like, if you have one of those necks that likes to take all of its relief in the first 3 frets, I think if it was rigid up there, it might be good to avoid that. But at the same time, like, you're really messing with things. I don't know. So maybe flexible.
It seems like they would be fighting each other. The original material under its normal movement and action under tension, and then that rod, if it was too rigid, that they would be fighting and breaking away from each other, as opposed to if it could move with it, would be to an advantage.
Could be.
Yeah.
You know, James and I came up with another jig for doing this, for like kind of like Mike Bauer's one, where you get Epiphones where they're like, it's like a, you know, a 90-degree break at the peg head, and the idea is to drill through the fingerboard and everything and just sink them in there. And I would like to be able to get a hold of a number of those and really test them, you know, like really like put them under some load and see what, you know, really like bear down on it with something and see what happens when you really go after it with some forces. But
you want to test this one?
That would be a good one to test.
That'd be an extreme test.
You want me to send you one?
Well, maybe. This is a double neck Epiphone. It's like a, you know, Led Zeppelin-y type thing. So
yeah.
Okay.
So as part of the development, we're working on you know, ways to insert the drill bushings. Unfortunately, the drill bushings are fairly expensive. So one of the solutions we came up use bronze bearings, and then embed them in the print as guides. And one of the advantages of this is that we could change the angle of you know, that it drills fairly easy to accommodate different necks, and just insert the bushings.
Do you have the second piece of that so they can see kind of so that locks together, and then it's got a radius on it to,
and then we just screwed it together.
Hmm.
So it seems like a pretty quick way to make a drill guide.
Where would the angle change take place in the guides that go in, or would you have to print these set the first block?
You'd print a different block. You could probably figure out how to shim it up if you wanted to, but the printing's rather, it's not crazy expensive to print that. It takes a little while, but there's only probably, like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 different angles out there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. And then James got the first going to bring the high heat now.
You got more gadgetry to show us, James?
Yeah, I have a little bit. So screen.
Which one do you want to share?
So this is one of the jigs. All right, you see that? So one of the things I find challenge is if I have to move around a bridge or install a bridge on a guitar that hasn't had one before, getting the string lined up on the neck and the bridge in the right location. So this is one solution that I came up with for wraparound bridges, and it's really just a 1 by 1/4 piece of aluminum with a couple of hex bolts to hold the bridge, and then a hole drilled down the center of each of those bolts.
More drill concepts and drill bushings, huh?
Right. And so then you can find the right location for the bridge, and then use a center punch to mark those holes.
You got to hold that up higher so we can see it. There you
go. So it's sized so that a center punch will go down and mark mark your post locations.
And you were
once
using a diagonal spacer to be able to set the distance to where you needed it.
Yeah, yeah, I was using that to you know, move it forward and backwards so I can get the. I'll share the screen again one time. I was using a machinist adjustable parallel there.
Yeah.
To move it forward and backwards. You know, I think if I did it again, I would like to get it on a thinner piece of metal because that puts the wraparound bridge a little higher than it would normally sit on most guitars.
Mm-hmm.
But it, you know, it gives me some confidence that I'm going to have everything centered and lined up and not, you know, not wander.
Sure.
There's adjustability on the bridge too. So, I mean, it's not like you're like 100% trying to nail your combination at this point.
You know, it's mostly to get the side to side. You know, I find that.
How did you make the bolts with the hole in it? Did you do that on the lathe or?
Yeah, I put them in the lathe and drilled a hole down the center.
All right then.
And then the second jig is really just a variation on that for a similar type thing. Just a temporary tailpiece for running the strings over a different style of bridge to get things centered. And I've even been able to tune the 2E's up to pitch, you know, to work out that it's in the right spot.
So what is that a do you have different ones of those for different string spacings, or is it?
No, this is, I don't remember exactly what this one is, but it's close enough that, you know, it would work for most bridges.
Because you know, you could do a very similar thing for just an acoustic top where you're locating the center line on your acoustic top.
You could, yeah.
You know, with the string spacing that way.
Yep.
James, are you doing the routing jig?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, okay.
I'll get to that. Okay, and then you know what, why don't I switch to? Can you switch to my iPhone?
I can.
Yeah.
You want me to switch?
Yeah, I just had a couple other things real quick. This is for the pickup winders. This is a jig for loading pickups. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you would load. This is obviously has the magnets in it already, but you would load your flat work into the jig, put the top on, and then each of the magnets gets pushed down with an arbor press. And that's all done on the 3D printer, so it's pretty easy to adjust for different types.
That's cool.
Yeah. This is a tool that it's not really a jig, but I was looking around for interesting things. Sometimes I'll have to take the plug out of fender necks to replace the truss rod nut. And when reinserting them, no matter how hard I try, I can never get them to go in perfectly straight. So I made this tool that slips right over that plug and has a T-handle, and you can adjust it slowly as you go to get the plug in there straight.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but it's just
will that also trim it down without marring the face of the bag head?
Not no, but it'll get it pretty near flush.
Hey James, I've got an idea.
All right, and then I'm gonna go mobile real fast.
Hey James, quick question.
Sure.
Are you using an 04 head on your 3D printer or an 06 head?
I've got an 05 right now.
And you find that it's tight enough tolerances for doing like your bushings and stuff?
Yeah, it's been good enough for that.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll have to go back and adjust things a little bit.
Who asked that question?
David.
Okay.
And then I showed this one a little bit during the saddle episode, but I had a metal version of this, and Ian and I were talking about trying to develop something that could be available via Luth prints. So I kind of recreated what I had done in metal, but using 3D prints. And I was able to employ some of these linear bearings here. Okay.
Which you're getting cheaper, by the way.
They're about $20 a piece, which is much cheaper than they used to be. I utilized a Tyag vertical milling slide, and these are about $85, so not too terribly expensive.
That's the Z-axis, by the way.
That is the Z-axis. And then I moved. My original version, I had a Fordham tool, which would work with this, but I wanted to try something that was less expensive. So this is an inexpensive air grinder. It takes 1/8" milling cutters, and everything else 3D printed or nuts and bolts. So you can. I put some stops on either side, so that
yes,
you can line it up to where your slot is, and then pretty easily. And it works really well. It's nice because you can go slowly. You can do 10 or 20 thousandths at a time, and creep up to the depth that you're going for.
that's cool.
And so I think I've got a few more tweaks to make, but eventually this will be available on the Luth Group website. I'll write up some assembly instructions.
That looks
I like how
amazing.
visible the bridge is under that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to see what you're doing. Probably benefit from a little light.
Are those rails, are they kind of dovetailed in under so it can't lift up?
I'll show you the bottom of it. Hang on a second. So oops, forgot one there. But there are lots of attachment holes via hex nuts. Is that what you meant?
No, is it attached to the track? It can't come off the track. He was asking.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Type thing?
no. Those are linear bearing. The bearings push into a groove on the side, so that they won't come off. It is
So no rocking.
Sorry.
No rocking.
No rocking. I added these support bars because it had a wiggle before, so I added those support. It's very stable.
Nice.
That's cool. And this is going to be available on Luth Prints?
Yes. All total, they're about $200 in parts.
Okay.
And the only requirement would be that you have an air compressor to run that spindle. If you already have a Fordham tool, it's pretty easy to make the Fordham tool do the cutting instead of the air grinder.
Right.
Do you like your Fordham tool? Do you use that a lot?
I do.
Okay.
I love the Fordham tool. I've got 3 of them in here, and they're amazing. Yeah.
Does anybody feel like clapping now, or do you want to clap?
This is amazing. Thank you.
Sure.
You.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
As usual, you've blown us away.
Oh.
Now we're going from Texas to Michigan. Hey, Ben.
Hi, Ben.
That's a tough act to follow.
Yeah,
I would do that.
Yeah, but you've got something with lasers in store for us. So
wait a second, lasers?
Can't be laser.
James, put a laser on that thing really quick. Laser rangefinder for your saddle.
Start out with this here. So I'm kind of moving my laptop around, so it might be kind of messy as far as trying to get like a good
Dude,
shot.
you got one of those high dollar coping saws, don't you?
I do. I use it for cutting F-holes.
Uh-huh.
But I broke the blade on it recently, so
Oh man.
I just haven't replaced it yet. But the room is set this up in.
Bring the
I
angle.
almost bought one of those things like 4 times, and then I was like, yeah, do it really? And then I didn't.
Oh, they're worth it. I mean,
Yeah.
it hurt at first, but I don't know, just having like I don't know. I think they're like $130 coping saws. It like makes
Yeah.
you feel powerful.
Okay. Okay. I could use that in my life.
I've got 13 $10 ones. And
Uh,
it was $130.
You mean the ones that release the blade every time you try to tighten them up?
That's why I have
Oh,
13. That's why I have 10 of
you
them.
You got those at like some estate sale, and they're really like $130 coping saws, but you got them for $10.
All right, so what do you got going on here, Ben?
So in this room, I have tile in here. So I really didn't want to like bolt this base down, which is the Total Ice like telescoping
The pedestal.
device. I didn't really want to hold it down by drilling through the tile into the floor. So what I ended up doing, this here, is I actually just took like 2 pieces of, I think the 3/4 inch OSB, screwed them together from underneath, and then I got some of that like anti-slip grip tape that you can get at Menards or pretty much any like big home improvement center. And as I'm carving or working on anything in particular, basically I'll just use my body as a counterweight. So I can put basically as much as I weigh onto this without it tipping over. So all
That's a good idea.
is just turn my work around to whichever way that I'm going to be working in. I don't have to worry about anything tipping over. So what I initially did this all for was actually to make a nice carving dish for doing arch top plates. Let me get a plate here that I can throw on there. So I have a few different methods. Hold on. I'm kind of out of shot here, but just grabbing some stuff. So I have a few different methods for work holding here. So what I usually use are just these little steel, 1/4 inch steel ejector pins, which they use in injection molding. So you mold your part, and then they just have like little pneumatic pistons that just drive the part out.
You have to hold it a little higher. There you go.
But the nice thing is that they're really precise. So if you drill a 1/4 inch hole, you're not going to have any slop in it, which is really nice for holding things like plates that have location holes in them. So when I do my plates, they have 1/4 inch tabs on, which I use for holding as I'm carving, and also for boxing it up. So when I glue this on its sides, I'll have these that will go into, I think they're like either 1/2 inch or 3/4 OD steel bushings. And then those just pop in there and they keep it locked in place as I'm boxing. But the really nice thing is that they're there during the carving process. So as I'm carving things, I can just put these in. And I have these kind of similarly set up to like the way that bench dogs would work. So the holes go all the way through this table, which I can actually take off the table clip just so you can kind of see how I mounted it.
And you've got a 1 3/4 inch pipe sticking out of the bottom of that.
Yep. I feel like that's the way to go.
Oh yeah.
You're the guy to talk to about that.
Although I've been admonished for calling it a pipe. I've been told it's called a tube.
Pipe, tube, same thing.
Can you tilt? You continue. Can you tilt the laptop down just a tiny bit so we can see more of the?
Yeah.
There we go.
Also bring this up a bit. But yeah, with this, for the most part, as I'm carving, I have enough here. These will usually do a good enough job in keeping everything in place as I'm working. But in case that doesn't work, I also have, I think these were like 10, 15 bucks on Amazon.
Yeah, you sent me pictures of these. These are really cool.
Yeah, so these are supposed to be adjustable so that you can put these into a 3/4 inch hole. And then you just put some type of wrench on here and you can tighten them down. And then these are usually supposed to be loose and be spring loaded so that you can have a little bit of play in them. They came with these little brass blocks.
Okay.
But for what I'm using them for, it doesn't really work. So I just 3D printed these little waist calls that then in turn, I'll give you guys a close up once I get this in, which clamp it into the waist. I have 2 on each side. Usually this isn't really something you need, but I do have it there just in case I run into something that's warped, or because sometimes as these plates sit, they'll start to move around a little bit. So try to get this rotated here.
There you go.
See a bit better. There, that holds it pretty well. And if I also need a little bit of extra reinforcement, I also have these little work hold downs that you can get for like CNCs with T-track that will go into holes that are in this rim, just so that I can clamp it down a bit. The one real reason that I wanted to make this, though, let me turn the lights out quick, is so that I can have directional lighting as I'm carving. So this is just a battery powered sheet music light that you can get. And then I also have a smaller one that's supposed to be just for like a clip on for reading at night. So depending on how much light I need and where I need it, it's kind of hard to get a good shot of what that really looks like to me. But just for casting shadows, as
This way you can, this is for you, so when you're reading your plate while you're carving it out.
yeah, I can see it a bit better. So these aren't like replaceable batteries. They're just, you just charge them, plug them into a wall. So I'll have like, I have 2 of these for each one. So when one starts to get low on charge, I'll just plug it into the wall and then I'll put the other one on. And then of course I still have like regular light, but that's the really nice thing about the Total Vice is that I can move it around and get different shadows depending on what I'm trying to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Then turn the lights back on here. Pull this out.
Ben, how much do those waste things cost each?
I think those ended up costing about $10 or $15 for, I think it was a pair. So they're really pretty inexpensive if you get them on Amazon.
I was thinking that might work for Doug's kind of side pressing thing as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
All right.
We're gonna go away from today with quite a shopping list.
I've been writing stuff down as you guys have been talking.
I recognize what this is.
How do you know about it? How did you learn about it? This set up here.
Now, when the first picture of this you sent me, I saw, and I said to myself, I said, I gotta call Ben and I gotta tell him he's doing it wrong. Because I noticed that you're using the jack, the smaller jack support, sideways.
I am.
And I wanted to know what the hell that was for, which you're gonna show us, I presume.
Yeah. Yep, so what I ended up doing, let's see if I can get a shot of this. So there's supposed to be, if you're not familiar with this vise, this one particular bracket here is supposed to be for heel support, which in a normal use type of scenario, you would have it there. But because I'm not really working on the guitar, I'm using this. What I did was move this down here. So anybody that has tried to do any amount of like either voicing on arch tops or tried to look at old arch tops to figure out what the thickness is, you might know about a magic probe, which is basically just like a little, actually I have it over here. It's a little digital probe with a magnet on the end.
You say magic or magnet?
Magic.
Magic?
It's a magical little probe.
Uh-huh.
But it's close up of that.
Huh.
And this will plug in, you can plug it into your phone, you can plug it into a computer, and what you do is you end up using this for measuring the thickness of plates. So you can use it for acoustics, you can use it for arch tops, I've seen people use it for violins, but you calibrate the distance between this magnetic ball and the end of the probe. And then what you do is you go in, this will stay on the outside of the guitar. This will go on the inside. And then you can actually feed this around and it will tell you how thick it is as you're going. And because I've been trying to keep fairly good track of what I've been doing as far as arch top carve thickness, I've been wanting to try to figure out a way that I can keep track of where I'm actually measuring at when I'm taking like a finished guitar and figuring out what it is, like say here or any other place. And that's been fairly difficult because like on a guitar in the white, you can just draw with a pencil on the guitar and you can create a grid to measure along the guitar and position that. So you always know you're measuring from the same place. But once there's lacquer on the instrument, obviously you can't be taking a pencil or a marker and drawing a grid on it. There might be, you probably could, but there's going to be some unhappy people if you do that. So what I ended up doing was making this bracket system with, this is actually a ghost hunting laser.
I told you he was going to use lasers.
Yeah.
Now, wait a second. You got magic and ghosts?
Yep, and lasers. So supposedly if you're a ghost hunter, you can project this at the wall at night when it's dark and you can see if something moved by it quicker. So this is actually a gridded laser. And what I do is I use that bracket that is on here. I lock that into place.
Boy, I bet Giuliano's going to be be upset he missed out on this. He was just here too. What?
Look at that.
And then what I can do is I can take that magic probe and then just measure at the intersection of all those lines. There's a little point right here. It's hard to, yeah,
How do you reference those lines later? Do you have a way of hooking that back up into like a? Are you jotting that down somewhere or?
yeah, so what I'm doing is I can maneuver this pretty easily, and I'll take the point that's on this laser and I'll put it at the intonation point.
Yeah.
Between the D and the G strings.
Uh-huh.
That kind of becomes my constant.
Uh-huh.
And then what you can do with this software is it's really cool. You can import a picture of your guitar, and then you can actually mark down digitally what the thicknesses were at those intersections.
Oh, cool.
So I'll end up doing that just to keep better track of what I'm doing. At some point, not that the wood is really bad or anything, but I actually do have some 1-inch by 1-inch steel tubing that I'm probably going to weld up and use for that.
Just so that it's the same every time.
Yeah, and just I don't know. I felt like it'd be kind of nice to keep with like the steel tubing theme of the Total Device. So at some point I'll do that.
Don't you think though that grid laser would actually scare ghosts off? Like, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like all that would do is just scare it away, and then you wouldn't be able to actually capture it.
Yeah, I think they know that you were onto them at that point.
Has it worked yet for finding ghosts?
No, it hasn't, but I haven't been looking hard. So
they're not in the guitar at this point. Okay.
Not yet. Maybe I just have to wait for them to get older. And then last few things I wanted to show you were actually using, I don't know if anybody's really heard of microjig.
Oh.
But they make a really nice modular system that you can
got a little F clamp there.
Yeah, so the difference between this and regular F clamp, you can kind of see it. It does have a taper to it, so it's a dovetail. So what you can do, and well, before I get too ahead of myself, I should show you this too. You can get all different kinds of pads and attachments. I'm sure you could 3D print these really easily. You get little knobs, but you can make all kinds of jigs that lock into these dovetails. So what I ended up doing was make.
Are you stockpiling those little mini sanders back there?
Yeah. They were all on sale, and I was like, take it all.
Are you doomsday prepping mini sanders?
I'm going to be stacked on
You're gonna be making dust like nobody else.
I love those sanders.
Oh man, this is great.
So you could use this as, man, I'm trying to get a good shot of this.
If you just back up a little bit and just point the thing down, there you go.
Yeah, the main thing is the camera should stop moving and it'll clear up a little bit. There you go.
So I have this in a jaw horse. So you could use this as like an assembly table or for clamping or whatever.
Yeah. Or
but
anything
I actually
really.
have this on a drill press. So I have a little XY table on drill press with a mill vise, and then that just gets chucked into the mill vise. So if you're drilling anything sketchy where you think you might need a little bit of extra oomph, you can just put this on there, take a few of those micro jig vices or micro jig clamps, and just clamp it on.
So you made that table there?
Yep. It's all out of just oak plywood. They sell a dovetail bit that you can use for creating these specific type of dovetails that work with their clamps.
Oh, okay.
And it's been really handy. I've been able to use it for a lot of different things. Continuing on with the micro jig theme, let me grab a set of my sides here. I do sides that have a mitered joint.
Okay.
And that's fairly hard to get by just holding it in place and shooting it with a plane. So what I did was I 3D printed a negative call of that cutaway. I made a shooting board that has one dovetail shaft on it. So what I can do is just imagine that these aren't together. I can clamp this in place. Micro jig clamp. I'll hold it in place at the right angle, well, theoretically. And then I can just go in there with a plane or with, I don't know, sanding block, and I can touch it up and get that angle without having to guess. Because you can do it without having anything to hold it, but it's a little difficult to do. So I figured that would save me a lot of headache if I made a little shooting board like that. And it worked really well. I used it for those sides. Nice. And then the one last thing I wanted to show you. It's just something that I did before I actually had the sand in my total ice. So what I did was I took 2 blocks of oak and I put a spacer in the middle. I drilled it out with a Forstner bit. And I took the spacer out so I kind of have an oblong hole. And then all I need to do here, and then it holds it tight. It is a little bit more finicky, but you can kind of go back and forth with it. You can clamp it at different angles.
Ben, how long you had that rock? Is that a Rockler clamps horse or whatever what's that called?
Yeah, it is.
How do you like that? I remember seeing those and thinking, man, that looks kind of cool.
They're one of those tools that if I didn't have one, I think I would probably go out and buy one right away.
Yeah, like if somebody stole it, you'd buy it immediately.
Yeah. I've used it for so many things, like just random stuff. If you run out of flat space,
yeah,
or you just need like a random place to clamp something, you can clamp like doors on end, and it'll hold it up.
Doug, what's that thing that our grandpas used to have, that the workmate or something? Or what was that? The clamping table thing.
The Black and Decker workmate.
The workmate, yeah.
Yeah. I had one of those. What are you talking about, Grandpa? I had one.
I still have one.
Okay. I didn't know that they were good. I just figured because my grandpa had one, it might not be the greatest thing in the world, like, I don't know, he had kind of a suspicious taste in faddish tool acquisition. But
yeah, you can these are pretty expensive. I think they're like 200 and something new.
what about pack up if you need it out of the way? Does it pack up pretty good?
Yeah, it does. I can actually pack it up for you just to show you how quickly you go from.
Did you say 200?
But yeah, but Harbor Freight is selling like it's basically a spot on equivalent of it.
Yeah.
$90 now. So
How much?
$90.
Oh, okay.
So you can get them a lot cheaper now. So they give you kind of a working time, how long it takes to break down.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't want to be seen carrying one of those up to a rooftop, would you? Like,
Oh man, I can't imagine carrying up a ladder. And then,
oh, that's nice.
and then it has a nice roller on it too, so you can actually roll it around.
Yeah. Jaw horse.
Hours. But I think that's about all I have.
Cool, Ben. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we had lasers and everything.
Yeah.
That was more than just a laser.
That was more than laser. I thought for sure
Just no go.
it's gonna show how to get a cat to do some loosen for you with a running around with a laser. But that was impressive.
I've never actually taken that laser and like shown it to a cat or a dog. I just kind of
They wouldn't even know.
and start seizing if I did. So
Okay.
Well, that's it. I think the jig is up.
The jig is up and now it's down, and I want to thank everybody that was involved. Doug, this was a short one for you. It only went 3 hours.
That's because I wasn't doing any math.
Oh, okay, that's right. We didn't plug it into the quadratic equation this time. So, all right. Well, thanks all of you jig sharers. And I, like a lot of food for thought on this one. I can't wait to see what happens the next time we come up and everybody's like, oh, I took that thing from so-and-so and then I tweaked it a little bit. And now I got this.
Yep.
So, yeah, good times, everybody.
Well, thank you. Thanks to Dan Earlywine, Mike Brower, Michael Bashkin, Bo Hannum, James Rodman, and Ben Kaler for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
thank you.
Blow over your shop, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you.